Welcome to the Room at the Table podcast. I'm your host, Kimberly Milo. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Room at the Table podcast. It's Kimberly Milo, your hostess, and I'm so excited to have you on the show. Thank you for following and watching on Spotify and YouTube. We have video. On Apple, it's just pure audio. So whichever platform you're on, I'm just so appreciative and grateful that you're even interested and following along. And if you are feeling encouraged by the podcast, please remember to rate it and write a review. I read all the reviews, as well as like and subscribe. Doing all of that really helps people find the podcast so more people can learn about Christ and just the journey of being a Christian and all the different and amazing guests that I have on the show. So when you do that, it really does help people find us. So thanks again. Today, I'll be talking to Cece Bloom. She is an author and she has a really darling book out that is related to Christmas. So it's very seasonal, as well as our Savior. So I'm really looking forward to having this kind of fun conversation about how that book came to be. Cece, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Kimberly.
It's really fun to meet you. This is our first time meeting, and Cece is a friend of another guest that I had named Wendy Chin, and they are friends through the foster adopt world. So before we dive into your book, tell me about like how you crossed paths with her, because that's a beautiful part of your life, being a foster mama, adoptive mama.
Adoptive now. Wendy and I both walked through the foster care journey together, and both of our youngest are adopted through that journey. Yeah, I ran in, actually, first time I met Wendy, I ran into her on a playground, go figure. We all had a bunch of kids and kind of got chatting about foster care and that sort of stuff. She had walked through, as a foster family, had a couple of kids in their home already, and we were getting certified. So that's kind of what struck up the conversation. And then we didn't see each other again for several months after our family had gotten certified and all that. We were actually at a support group together, and I recognized her and I was like, how do I know her? And I remembered, oh, you're the lady I met on that playground that one time. So,
Gosh.
yeah, we kind of got to chatting, and she invited me to something, and that just kicked off a friendship. And it was, God knew the timing, because we really both needed each other as we walked through our foster care journeys. And there's nothing quite like having a friend who's going through the same stuff that you're going through, and not just a friend, but a friend who knows the Lord and who you can really like dig in deep with when stuff is difficult. And obviously both of our journeys had a lot of challenges, going through court systems and a lot of unknowns, and a lot of just trusting that God had called us into this, regardless of what it looked like in the different scenarios. So getting to walk with her through that was amazing. It really made us fast friends and deep friends.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm so sure. And so you did end up adopting your son, and it's a boy? Is that
Boy,
right?
yes, my youngest. Yeah.
And so how many kids do you have? And you're in Southern California, I take it.
Yes, I'm in Southern California. I've got 4 kids. My oldest is 15 and a half, all the way down to my youngest just turned 9 this week.
Okay. Oh, you have 4, and within like, what is that? 6 years. So that's a busy life. I understand that for sure.
Yes,
And so
it is.
you're an author. So you have written this adorable book, and to be honest, haven't read it yet because I haven't been able to get my hands on it yet. And it looks like it's perfect for kids that are coming into, the Christmas season, but really maybe kids who we don't want them to be confused between the reason for the season, but then all the goodness in our culture with Santa and all of the fun activities that we get to do during the holiday. So I love that you created this. And what I learned last night, everybody, is that there's actually this really fun website that goes with it where you can be like a secret agent, because tell us the name of your book.
Yes, here, I have it right here. It's called The Top Secret Truth About Santa Claus. And
Love
the
it.
premise of the book, so I have 4 children, and we homeschooled for about 10 years. And I noticed with a lot of different conversations, especially in the homeschool community, parents were really torn on kind of what to do and how to approach the Santa Claus talk. And I think that's not just homeschool. I think a lot of parents kind of struggle with what to do with this topic of conversation. And it's
Right.
really unavoidable, right? I mean, Santa Claus is everywhere. And so I just, after years of kind of struggling with it myself, and hearing and seeing a couple of disastrous Santa Claus conversations go wrong in different families, I just thought there has got to be a better solution to this, because I mean, why is this such a catastrophic event in some families? And really, kids, like you said, kids are asking questions and parents feel torn about how to answer them.
So
And
true.
you see I call it the Santa Claus spectrum. You've got people on one end who like don't want to touch it. They don't want to talk about Santa at all. They feel like it takes away from the real meaning of the season. You got people on the other side of the spectrum who go all in. They love
Mhm.
Santa. They love everything about it and they want to do the whole thing. They're hiding, different things in the chimney. They're, putting reindeer tracks on the roof. So I really thought,
Elf on a shelf, all of that stuff.
yes,
Yeah.
there's all kinds of things that go to it. And it is fun, right? There's a lot of fun behind all the traditions. So I started
Right.
to just dive into how did it all start and how did we get to this place of who Santa is today in our culture? And really,
Mhm.
I just went back to the beginning of the real story. And it goes back to Saint Nicholas of Myra or Nicholas of Myra, who became Saint Nicholas. And the true
Mhm.
story of this real man who lived about 300 AD is such a beautiful God centered story. And I thought if we could just take it back to this, it really solves the problem for everybody. So if you're that family who's already dove in on the Santa Claus and you've done a deep dive and you're all into it, this book is what you can read when the gig is up. But if you're the family that maybe you don't want to touch it, but you realize that there's really no way not to touch this topic in the culture and you want to address it, this book is where you can start. So it tells the true story of Nicholas of Myra. And one of my favorite parts of his story is I didn't know this until I started doing the research is that he was actually orphaned. So being a foster and now adoptive mom, I never knew that, but when I read that part of his story, I was so deeply touched because it was in the greatest moment of loss in his life, losing both of his parents, that he received an inheritance and he chose to use that inheritance to secretly bless others in his community. And that kind of
Wow.
became his life mantra. Yes. And that's something that most people don't know. And I'm like, what a
No,
beautiful,
no.
but yeah, most people don't. And when you dig into the true story, you realize it is such a beautiful story. And I can see why God used it to really touch the world. And obviously,
And
it's gotten distorted to something that is different than what the original story was. He wasn't magical, but he did have obviously the power of the Holy Spirit. He was a follower of Jesus and part of the early church. Really an incredible historical figure when you dig into all of that. Um, but what he did with his personal life and trying to do it in a secret way, that a lot of his original story is in the traditions we use today. Just most people don't realize that that's where it comes from.
oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you to educate on us on that because most people don't know any of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's a hidden gem.
So tell us about well, first, let's go back really quickly. Did you dive into this decision to write this book because you were conflicted as a Christian and you wanted to have the fun of the season and Santa Claus, but you also were like, of course, Jesus is why we're celebrating Christmas, and that's why you decided to write the book and dive really into the research behind it?
Yeah, it was a conversation that came up every year at Christmas with my oldest. And even before that, I have, nephews that are older and watched a lot of friends kind of walk through this. And every year it seemed to present a problem for parents and especially, yes, Christian parents, I think more often than not. But actually, one of the biggest kind of disasters I'll say I saw
Yeah.
happen with a family that they weren't actually Christians, but it created a distrust issue with one of their
Mm,
kids who felt like they'd
yes.
been getting lied to. And it really made the kid upset and it caused a rift. And so that was one of the first ones I saw that I thought like, oh my goodness, yeah, this can be problematic. And obviously it depends on the kid and the situation, but
Sure.
some families, don't run into quite that big of a problem. But I saw that early on. And then a couple of times I was on a parent chat. My kids were in like a hybrid co-op with homeschool. And I remember a parent got on the co-op and said, or the parent chat and said, whose kid is coming to school and saying Santa Claus isn't real? Because, when you've got a third or a fourth in a family, in birth order, they're finding out way earlier than a firstborn, right? So it's second
So
grade,
true.
about third, usually is when things start to hit. And so this mom was really upset. And then these other moms started chiming in. And in this case, it was Christian families. And it was funny because some of the lingo, we're Christians, so we don't do Santa. And other moms, well, we are too, and we love Jesus, but we still like Santa. It turned into this funny conversation, and I just was like, I mean, really, there's got to be help out there. So I
Yeah.
did some research, and then, like I said, when I started reading the real story, I'm like, this is the answer. Just go back to the roots of how it all began, because this
Okay.
is true.
That's a beautiful story and example. And I'm laughing because this relates to so many things with kids, whether it's the
Yeah.
tooth fairy or the
Yes.
Easter bunny, right? All the holidays.
Yeah.
And I wasn't raised, I was Christian, and that I knew that God loved me and I had Jesus in my heart, but that was it. Like we didn't go to church, and was the third of three girls. And I remember thinking that the Easter bunny was real and running out to the front
Hmm.
yard on Easter morning because my dad said, "Oh, the Easter bunny's going right around the corner." And I ran out there thinking I was going to see his tail or something around the corner, and I missed it. And I was like devastated, and I wanted to run after him. And my
Yeah.
dad was like, "Oh, no, no, you can't run after him." And I'll never forget it, because in my mind and my heart, he was so real and it was so fun.
Hmm.
Same thing with Santa. Same thing even with, like, when your parents needed to take your blankie after you're sucking your thumb or whatever it was. And they're like, well, it's time to give it away. But as the third child, when you said the youngest, I
Hmm.
was like, yeah, okay, take the blanket. Like, you're used to watching the older siblings. And my youngest daughter, when she found out, spoiler alert right now, people, if you have kids in the room, you want to pause it right now. But when my youngest found out that Santa Claus, was a myth and was just a
Yeah.
fun tale, she was like, yeah, I kind of figured it out. Like, she was so different than like the first one or two that we were really trying to like make sure they thought it was magical and,
Yeah.
all of that stuff for as long as possible. In fact, to this day, we still say, well, if you don't believe, maybe you won't get any gifts. Like, we still play that, but we're strong Christians. So I really understand that conflict. I find it culturally very joyful and
Yeah.
fun, but I also, of course, keep the reason for the season very front and center as well. So
Yes.
I personally feel like there's a way to do both, but it's
Yeah.
cracking me up that you're talking about how the youngest ones can go to school, or maybe even an older one that has the temperament of like, what's the big deal, and can like tell the secret. And the other parents are like, I've been working so hard for so many years to keep the secret, and now this kid comes to school. So you're making me giggle.
I was going to say that is another thing in this book. I tried to kind of tackle all the issues that surround this conversation, and that's another one is once kids learn the truth, then they have the potential to be the bean spiller, So,
Yeah.
so in the book, also you touched on the top secret truth agency. That's part of it.
Yes.
There is a page in the book that you get to where, and it starts out letting parents know, like, don't read this book unless you're ready to unveil the whole truth. So you start out
Got
with
it.
a little warning to the reader so they know what they're getting into. And
Okay.
it tells the story of Nicholas of Myra, starting with him as a kid, because I think it's important for kids to realize this is a true
Okay.
story about a real person, and God used his life to really actually change the world. I mean, the entire world knows
Wow.
who Santa Claus is. And I think it's neat for kids to see that he started out as a kid himself. And it was in those
Amazing.
early years that he had this impact, this devastating event that he used instead of wallowing and letting it ruin the rest of his life. He said, like, okay, God, what do you want to do with this? And
Right.
that it's from that moment that you have this launching pad of who we know Nicholas of Myra to be, this secret gift giver, right? And this is who we, as the pretend Santa, we try to kind of emulate, right? But what's so beautiful is, so you get to a page in the book where there's a contract, and it tells kids the truth about, Nicholas, this Nicholas that you've learned about is Saint Nick, is Santa Claus, is Kris Kringle, is all these names you've maybe heard. And
Mhm.
what we're going to tell you now is that he's not magic. And that's actually the exciting part of the story, because what
Mm.
he did as a simple, real person is something that you can do and you can be a part of too. And so it really
Mm.
encourages kids to dig into that and to dig into what God has gifted them with and the people around him and who's right in front of them, and to take what they already have and to use that just like Nicholas did. So there's a contract
Mhm.
page in here where you sign it and you acknowledge that you've learned the truth, and that part of learning the truth is not not spilling the beans for people. Nicholas of Myra wasn't looking to get the credit. He wasn't,
Mhm.
shouting to everyone in his community, I'm the one that gave that gift. I'm the one that did that. No, it was quite the opposite. Is when he gave
Wow.
gifts, people didn't know he did it. And obviously he was found out. And this in the book, you hear the story of where one of the times when he was found out, there was a family that was so deeply impacted by his gift giving. There were three sisters who back in that time they didn't have a dowry, they didn't have enough money, and so obviously we don't in American culture today, we don't know much about dowries. The book explains it in a real,
Mhm.
age appropriate way. But they didn't have enough money to get married and to kind of continue their life. And they would have ended up in real dire straits. And Nicholas of Myra knew that about this family. So he started out with the first sister and he dropped coins into their socks that were hanging at a window. And so this is where we get the tradition of hanging up stockings, right?
Oh,
In different cultures around the world, they do it differently. Like in Spain, they put out shoes and there's different ways that we do it. But that's where we get that tradition because this is one of the things he really did. Well, that in turn saved the first sister. And when the next sister came of age, he did it for the next sister. Well, when the third sister came of age, the dad said, I have to know who's doing this because it's changed our lives. He saved two of my
wow.
daughters. And he slept by the window every night until he caught Nicholas and
Wow.
basically confronts him and I have to know who you are. I have to thank you for what you've done. And so the story here kind of talks about how that family was so impacted and how it changed their lives. And they became kind of the first generation of people who wanted to emulate what Nicholas did. And it passes it off to us today as a modern reader that we have the opportunity now to do the same thing, to take this story that is a real story and a true story about a simple man that God used, and we could be the same thing. So when you sign that contract, you acknowledge that you know the truth and that your goal isn't to go shout it to everybody, but your goal is to be like Nicholas of Myra and do what God did with him by using what you have in front of you and looking for ways to impact others secretly, not for the credit or the glory or the fame, but
Mhm.
just to kind of go be about it with your family and with those around you. And so on the website, which you mentioned, it's thetruthaboutsanta.com, there is a blog that kind of gives parents and families next steps of what does that look like once your kid knows the truth, and how do you get your kids to join in on the fun with you? Because really that's the next step for families, right? Is whether you dove deep in or whether you want to start your Christmas tradition this way, we have an opportunity as families, especially as Christian families, to really point our kids into looking for others and looking at what does God want us to do, not just at Christmas
Mhm.
time, but year round as a family to serve those around us and those in our community. And it doesn't always look like, you know, something that everyone sees. Oftentimes it's a quiet service, is sometimes it's a little thing. It might even be a note of encouragement, to a neighbor, to someone who's grieving. There's so many simple ways we can have eyes to see others. And I just want, I would love for parents and families to take hold of that part of Santa Claus's story and run with it.
That's how people don't know this. So what time period was Nicholas of Myra, and where is this? What country is this?
Yeah, so it was around 300 AD, I think 280 AD exactly. And he was
Wow.
born back then it was Greece, but it's modern day Turkey in Myra. Myra is the town he's from. So like I
Wow.
said, today that is Turkey, but back then it was considered Greece. So that's where he was.
Amazing.
He was one of, yeah, early church member, knew about Jesus and was
Wow.
impacted by Jesus's life. And that's what, had him thinking about others and wanting to serve. And that's really what made the great impact on his life, which is why I believe we even know the story today, even though it's changed and morphed into something different than what it
Mhm.
originally was. I really believe God let this story be told because of the impact he knew it would have. And my hope and prayer is that we can get it back to that original story and have more people learn this beautiful story because it's a miracle that it's in existence today, really.
Literally, like I'm kind of dumbfounded. I'm 53 and I'm like, how do I not know this? I mean, I guess I've never spent time to go research it, but this just feels like n- most in American culture, I doubt most people know about the
Yeah.
story. And yet this is literally the founding of our entire Christmas culture with
Yeah.
Santa, as far as
Yeah.
it's concerned. So that is just blowing my mind how nobody knows about this real foundational true story that
Yeah.
started Santa Claus. So when did Santa Claus, like, when did that? I'm thinking, was it a Saint Claus? Like, when did this get transferred
Yeah.
over?
So I'm glad you asked. There's a page in the book that talks about this. And so just so you know, it's a simple book. It's not a textbook or a history book. I mean, you can see there's pages with pictures, not a ton of words. This is a picture with like
Mhm.
three sisters kind of talking about their story. And then to your question of how it became Santa Claus, this is one of my favorite pages in the book. you can't see the whole thing. I'll do one at a time. But this is kind of showing how Santa Claus has morphed in different
Wow,
cultures and
that's cool.
traditions. I'll just actually, I think I might read you this page just because it answers your question exactly. And I want you to understand it's a rhyming book and it's simple. So it says, and just like a game of telephone, each land put a spin on how they said his name. Nicholas became Saint Nicholas. But when the Dutch said it, Sinterklaas is what it became. Other countries followed St. Nick's example, giving credit to God alone, looking back to that first Christmas gift inspiration, born in a stable under a bright star that shone. Those countries gave
Mm.
secret gifts in the name of the Christ child. So certain countries didn't want to say Nicholas to have like, it to be about his name. So they called it gifts in the name of the Christ child. And in their language,
Mhm.
it was said Christkindl. When the tradition was passed on to new lands, the name became Kris Kringle. From Sinterklaas came Santa Claus, a name you probably know. And now that the tale has been passed on to you, you can be part of how it will grow. And so then that's when it continues on to the, um, the contract page and stuff like that. But yeah, so it's actually the Santa Claus in a different language was Sinterklaas. And when the Dutch immigrants migrated here to the United States, they would use the term Sinterklaas, Sinterklaas, and that it just morphed into Santa Claus here in the United
Oh
States in
my
English.
gosh. I'm so excited actually to go buy the book so the adults can read it. Like, forget about
Yeah.
the kids. Like, I think the adults would find it fascinating.
Yes, I am huge. I love traditions and I love Christmas traditions in particular. And I that was my hope in part two for this book is that it doesn't end with telling your kids the truth, that this book is really just the beginning of a new tradition for families to look at how they approach Santa Claus, but Christmas in general. And like I said, beyond Christmas and using this as just kind of a launching pad of inspiration of what God can do with a simple person, just a regular person. It doesn't take fame, it doesn't take fortune. It just takes really obedience and seeking the Lord with whatever it is he's given you. I mean, in Nicholas's case, I mean, like I said, what he got was in his biggest tragedy. It was this inheritance he received in the moment of his life's biggest tragedy. I just think I mean, it doesn't get much more inspirational than that for kids and adults.
The inheritance he received in his biggest tragedy, which reminds me of, in my opinion, the world's biggest tragedy was when Christ was killed on the cross. And
Mhm.
yet the inheritance we have, that
Yeah.
we are now can go boldly before the throne and have a relationship with God. And, there's a new covenant and new promises for us that we're free in him, no matter what we've done. He's for us, with us, and wants a relationship with us. Like, what a super cool connection. And have you heard stories about, through your book, people wanting to share with you, like, now that they understand some of the cultural history, not just the Christian history, but the cultural
Mhm.
history of this real boy so many thousands or hundreds of years ago, giving back? Have you heard stories of people, like, what they've been inspired to do through reading your book?
I've I've gotten some, and I've gotten some like parents who said that this is like has flipped it on its head for us. Like this is how we're going to raise our kids, and this is how we're going to do our Christmas tradition from now on. And so, the book is still kind of in the earlier stages, and so my prayer is that I can get the word out more and more. And I appreciate you helping me do that today. Because yeah, just the more people know, the more hopefully it will have that kind of impact of families taking hold of, you know, this inspiration being something they can use to teach their kids in a simple way. And I really think this is the beginning when you're at this stage of this conversation with your kids. It's the beginning of it sounds silly, but it really is an important conversation. And it's the beginning of many important conversations to come as a parent with your kids. And so I
For
just
sure.
yeah, I mean, your kids are older and grown. I mean, how many more important conversations and difficult conversations have you had with your kids since the Santa Claus talk? There's been a lot, right? So if
Oh, yeah.
we start with this conversation, and just kind of demystify it for parents and families so it's not this big scary thing, but really a beautiful thing, no matter where you start. Like I said, whether you've deep dove into all the Santa Claus traditions, this book is here to help. Or if this is how you want to start it, really, any way you go about it, I hope and pray that this can just be the beginning of many beautiful conversations you have with your kids and the beginning of just trust being built in those conversations, that your kids want to come to you to find out the real story on things. Because, like I said, this is an early one, but if they can trust you with this kind of conversation, they're going to
Right.
start, you know, coming to you with more. And if you take the time to sit with them and give them a real answer and let them know that this matters and that you care at this stage in their life, it begins to build just that connection for deeper conversations that are going to come later. And I've got two teenagers now, so I'm entering the next season of heavy hitting conversations that are coming. And I want my kids
Mm-hmm.
coming to me for them, and I
For
want them to trust that I'm going to give them real answers. I'm going to do it with love, and that I'm, a trustworthy source to come to, and that,
sure.
that they can always come here. So
What I love about this too is that parents can determine, every parent knows, especially, a mother, if she's, really connected to her children, she knows they all have a different temperament at all have a different personality. And some need that truth and are kind of like, this isn't real. And they're watching the culture. And some are just like, it's beautiful. I love it. It's gifts. I'm not going to ask questions. Every
totally.
child is different. So a parent can determine this child might be ready for this. And then there's this kind of pact of like, we're going to allow your siblings to have the mystery and the magic until they're ready. And then
Sure.
we can bring them in on the truth, or you can tell the whole group if you have more than one child and read this book together. So what I'm thinking is that some kids might be ready for this at 5 or 6 or 7, depending on their age. And some aren't ready till they're 12 or 13 or 14 because they want the mystery and the fantasy and the fun. And they're not going to listen to their friends who say it's not real, or whatever they're hearing out at
Right.
school with their friends. And there's different faiths out there, right? So there's Jewish kids doing Hanukkah, and they're not obviously going to talk as much about the Christian part of Christmas, and maybe aren't believing in Santa Claus because they have Hanukkah. Like there's all kinds of
Yeah.
different cultural and ethnic and religious things going on at the holiday, Kwanzaa and things like that. So what's cool about this book is it's not even just correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like it's not really even just a Christian lesson. The Christ child is in there because that's part of how the Santa Claus story developed, or the title, the name Santa Claus. But really, no matter what your faith is, you sounds like you could read this book. Is that accurate? And whatever age.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, so the beginning, it does point out that Nicholas was a follower of Jesus, and
Okay.
that would be why, Christmas, why he would even celebrate Christmas, because really,
Right.
today a lot of
Okay.
people
Okay.
celebrate Christmas culturally, but they don't realize that it
Yes.
is the birth of Christ that we're celebrating.
Right.
So it does point
Right.
that out. But yeah, I would hope that if you're a non-Christian, that you might be open-minded enough to really look into the roots of what it is you're celebrating. And I did have
Right.
one person who got upset with me because they weren't a Christian, and they felt like, I don't want to, this is not what I want to teach my child. And I said, you know, all due respect, you're welcome to teach them whatever you want, but this is, this is a
Yes.
true
Right.
story. I'm not making anything up in this book.
Right. Right.
So that, it's funny to me that you want to tell your child the truth, but you don't want to tell them the truth. I
Yeah.
didn't say it that way, but I was like, I'm not really sure how to help you there. Obviously, you want to avoid Jesus. That is what we are celebrating here, whether you believe it or not. That is what Christmas is.
Right. Right. Wow. So,
Mhm.
so cool. So what were the ages? Well, first of all, when did you write the book? I thought it was a couple years old. How old is it?
Yeah, it is. Yes, it is a couple. It was released in 2022. So this is like
Okay.
the third Christmas, I believe, it's been out. Yeah,
And your kids, when you wrote it, were how old?
um, let me think here. Uh, I would have had like a 12, 10, 8, and 6. So I had two that were right there kind of on
Yeah.
that cusp. But it was fun because I actually read it to my older two before, like they actually helped me with, like, what do you think about this before I got it published and all that? Like, what do you think about this? Because
Okay.
this is something, and so it was fun to get their input and hear what they thought as, kids who'd gone through the
Yeah.
conversation.
Yes.
And then I got to read it, yeah, with my other two, really more in real time of like, okay, this is time to address this. You're having questions and you're wondering. So here's what we
Right.
got. So that's been really fun. I've got you mentioned the Top Secret Truth Agency. So what you can find on the website, thetruthaboutsanta.com, is that when you sign that contract, it talks about you joining the Top Secret Truth Agency, where you can now be
Yeah.
part of what St. Nicholas did. And, you're not going to, like I said, you're not going to spill the beans. You're going to keep it to yourself and your family and whoever I say whoever's reading this book to you is your senior agent, and you're now a junior agent of the Top Secret Truth Agency. Yeah. And your senior agent can help you come up with mission ideas for things that you can do to bless others in your community and your family and whatever it is that they might approve of. And on the website, even have like certificates that they can give to their kid that you can download them and print them from the website, and then they can give them to their kid to just acknowledge, just from the parent to child, like, I'm proud of you. This is amazing. I love what you're doing. But my kids, it was a joke. They were the first junior agents of the Top Secret Truth Agency. So they got to be initiated first, and we've gotten to work on different, missions together. And yeah, they've been an
Yeah, when you
inspiration
say
in all of this.
missions,
Yeah.
when you say missions, what do you mean by that? I mean, I saw the website and I had no idea it was that in depth and that involved. And so, moms, you can really go into making this a really fun adventure with your kids, especially depending on their age. They'll probably get into it when you get to the website. There's printouts and things. But
Yeah.
what do you mean by mission? I love the you call it TST agents, right?
Top Secret Truth Agency. Yep. Because this is,
what's
the top secret truth about Santa Claus. So the Top Secret Truth Agency. So yeah, once you know the truth and you sign your little contract, you're part of the Top Secret Truth Agency, and your parent or guardian, whoever it is that is, overseeing you reading the book, is your senior agent, and they, along with them, you as a junior agent can jump into top secret truth missions. So missions are just like top secret missions, like you would, if you've been, spy culture or whatever. The goal is that we're not going to have other people find out that it's us necessarily, and we're not going to necessarily go about this for doing it, for everybody to know. But obviously your senior agent needs to know what you're up to. So mission ideas, I have this little blog post on the website where you can learn about like the mission ideas, and I've kind of formatted it as starting right where you are. And so I call it like the circle of influence. Our culture today is so about influence, and oftentimes we see influence being like, what can I put about myself out there, right? And in this case, we're kind of flipping that on its head. And influence is really, what is it that I can do, as Christians, seeking God first and asking him, like, Lord, what is it that I need to work on, starting with myself and you, And so missions start with yourself, and there I have a whole bunch of ideas on what that looks like: praying, talking to God, journaling, thinking about ways that you can be intentional with how you use your time, where you're directing your thoughts, your mind, your actions, right? So starting there, and then from there it moves into the family, like, is the next circle of influence, sphere of influence, I think I call it. So your family. And so talk about what, obviously, coming from a foster adoptive family, our family dynamic looks different than others. I know there are kids that their family looks way different, right? So they might not even be living with mom and dad, but we kind of build off of like, what does that family sphere look like in your house? And so who would be the people that you might be able to impact in that sphere of influence? And I'm big on teaching the kids too, like, you need to have that permission from your senior agent, whoever that is. Like, they need to be signing off on these missions, because I want to make sure kids are, going out and doing something that their parents are like, what? You did what? So that was like the next sphere of influence. And then it goes into like your neighborhood, and like, what does that mean? Who's your neighbor? And why is it important that, what are things that we could do in our neighborhood that might make a difference? And these are things that are real tangible, for kids. Like, I think kids oftentimes think like, my life doesn't matter, I can't have an impact on anyone. That'll be something I might be able to do when I'm older, when I'm bigger, when I'm an adult. And that's not true, and I want kids and families I want kids to be empowered that, like, your life matters now. You can make a difference now. Just like St. Nicholas's story started as a kid. I mean, when he was orphaned, he was like, they say between probably like 14 and 16. So he was a young boy, really. And look at the difference he made. So I want kids to realize that they can start now with looking for ways that they can serve and impact themselves, their family, people in their community. And it goes out from there beyond community or beyond neighborhood. It's like community. And we explain like, okay, what's the difference between your neighborhood and the community? And then from the community, it keeps going out to the point where, yeah, maybe God has it where you are doing things internationally. Maybe God wants you to do a mission somewhere else. But
Yeah.
what does each of those steps look like? How do you get there? And what might you do in each of those spheres of influence to impact
Beautiful.
others? So, yeah.
Love how you've found a way to let God use the truth of Christmas, and because of not just that Jesus, that's his birthday,
Mm,
but the actual story of that child, and then a real story of that child, of the other, another child like Jesus, but another child in another country, just has impacted the entire
mhm.
world just from out of his suffering. I guess the gratitude he felt and wanting to help other people because he knows what it's like to suffer. So then he just gives, and then it grows and grows and grows, and he's through his service, which is
Mhm.
obviously what Christ did. So it's just such a, it's all God, right?
Yeah.
It's a divine story. And so people don't understand that connection between, it's not just Christ's birthday, but the story of being adopted into God's family, even through your suffering, to serve and help other people because you're grateful even for still being alive or for what you have. I mean, it just grows and grows. It's such a cool concept that you've been able to create. And you said that you wrote that on your blog. Is that right? Where you're explaining kind of the circles that you move out to keep
Yes,
serving?
exactly. Yeah.
So
If you
your
go to
blog is tied in through
yeah,
the website.
if you go to the truthaboutsanta.com, there's a like a tab that says blogs and they're categorized in there so you can find it in there.
So cool. And so are your blogs through the website all related to the book and Christmas and service and giving and all of that? Or do you go into other things too related to faith or Christmas?
Right now I've stuck with like that website in particular is for the book, so I really kind of stuck it around all of that and just keeping it there for now. I have other books that are in the works, and so we'll see what happens when those come. But yeah, I really just wanted there to be a place for families to go. I know most people like to buy books on Amazon and things like that, and my book is available on Amazon as well. But
Yeah.
on the website, that's the only place you can find all of the other stuff, and the book
All
is
the
there as well.
Yeah, all the extra goodies are on the website. So I was
Exactly.
really happy that I found the website because I was looking at the book and I was trying to look in the book because I don't have it yet. And now I understand, like, it doesn't matter what age you are, you know,
Mhm.
anybody can enjoy the history lesson of it and really how it relates personally, and like being a game changer for families. Like, obviously people do things if they're Christians through their church, especially at Christmas time, to serve and give back. Now, this to me feels like it doesn't really matter what your faith is. If you're willing to accept that there is some history there that was
Mhm.
related to the story of Jesus, you can still be serving and giving back no matter what your faith is.
Yeah.
And this book could just kind of help drive it home, especially for American culture where Christmas is so front and center, like basically by, November 1 or October 15th, sometimes, it's like you
Mhm.
see Christmas starting in the stores and
Yeah.
all over. So what a cool concept. I just want it to grow and for people to learn about it. So I'll do my best. I'm certainly going to like give it away as gifts and stuff. What a darling idea. So tell us about the other things you're writing. I know you probably can't reveal too much because I think you said things are in the works, but are your writings fiction? Are they Christian based? Like, what's your genre that you're hoping to kind of expand your writing in?
Yeah. I've got a couple things. The current project I'm working on is a fictional novel on spiritual warfare. So it's a very different turn after doing a children's book like this.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, that's kind of the next one that I hope to have published soon. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, it's quite a different quite a different
A
jump from
different world. Yeah.
yes.
But so relevant if you're a believer, so we see that all the time. And often we forget that we think it's just the world around us and we don't realize there's a spiritual component going on all the time. And the deeper you get into your faith, Christianity, and reading the Bible, you understand like, oh yeah, there's a lot more going on here that meets the eye than what I can see.
Yes.
So awesome. How did you meet Christ? I usually ask that at the beginning, but now that we're kind of wrapping up, tell us how you did meet Christ because everyone's journey is so different with that.
Yeah, I was raised in a Christian home. I remember praying at 3 years old, like, give Jesus my heart. But it really, I will say,
Me
yeah. Um,
too.
but I had just finished 6th grade, my family moved from like LA County area to South Orange County. and in Southern California. And um I was the new kid all of a sudden. I had a great community where I was from and family all around there. And then suddenly I was the new kid and I was starting seventh grade as a girl, brand new, which, you know, all you women out there can understand how difficult that is. Being the new kid
Mm.
in junior high, oh my goodness. So I actually went to a small Christian school in seventh grade, and it was one of the hardest years. I had such a difficult time. It was really actually tough and really kind of earth shattering a little bit because of how I was treated by a lot of these Christian kids. And I made pretty much like two friends the whole year, one of
Oh,
whom is still one of my very best friends to this day. So God knew what he was doing. I can look back now with hindsight, with a lot of hindsight, because that year I only spent 1 year at that school. By the end of the school year, I wasn't a kid that cried, and I cried almost every day getting dropped off at school. I did
oh,
not want to go. But I had this one
oh,
friend, and she invited me to Young Life, which is like a Christian parachurch organization. And I started going with her. And through Young Life, I just really began to realize that it was a personal relationship with Jesus, with like the creator of the
oh,
universe actually wanted to know me. And that was so different than what I understood when I was a 3-year old praying, for Jesus to come into my heart. And that's when I really feel like my faith became personal. And I can look back
oh,
now and see like, God even had a way of stripping it down as, a 12, 13-year-old girl, really kind of going like, oh my gosh, I don't have all the things that I had at my other house, and I didn't have the friends and I didn't have all the, there was just a lot that I was stripped down to. And I didn't realize how he was going to use that. But it was in that like seventh grade year really that I began to come to know Jesus as a real personal savior and someone that I
oh.
really needed. And that changed my faith from then on. And really, yeah, that's where I can say I feel like I took hold of my faith as my own, not just as like, oh, I was raised in a Christian home.
Interesting. Yeah, that's common that some kids will feel that in middle school, especially when your
Mhm.
body's changing and there's such a hard time. In my opinion, it was not for everybody, but there's so much going on. You're getting older, your school's getting harder, you're developmentally changing, you're
Yeah.
not needing your family to the same degree, but you still very much do. Your friends are becoming everything. So it makes sense then that the kids that are really reached in middle school, I think it's a special group
Mhm.
of, it's a special population at that time. I can tell why middle school, youth ministry, that you usually hear those pastors in that youth group enjoying working with that age level
Yeah.
because they are so curious and hungry and malleable. Whereas
Yeah.
when you get to high school, it's like you've a little bit, you're not quite, you're solidifying yourself, but you feel a little more confident. Whereas middle school, you're just like, what is this? Who am I? I'm still youthful, but
Right.
I'm moving towards,
Hmm.
later teen adulthood.
Yeah. And they're
So
looking
that
for
makes
acceptance so much. They want to be accepted. So yeah, Jesus is sweet.
when you said that, you know what it made me think of was the boy in the book who Santa Claus is based off of, that the real
Mhm.
boy, because you said he was like 14.
Yeah. They say somewhere between like 14 to 16 years old, probably when he lost his parents.
I mean, it's so tragic, right? Because you're just
Yeah.
so sensitive and so developmentally at such an awkward and yet fundamental developmental
Mhm.
stage of your life. So when you
Mhm.
said that at middle school, I was like, gosh, it's kind of reminded me of him, that God met him personally at that
Yes.
time. And then here
Yes.
the story comes out of it. And the same thing for you. God met you
Mhm.
personally. And one thing I was thinking when you were talking is, I think so many people don't understand what it means to have a relationship with
Mhm.
Jesus. So this
Mhm.
is kind of a tangent, but that's confusing, I think, for a lot of people who really see God as, and he is a holy, just God. And there's this like separation, but the personal relationship is where you can really talk to him. You can journal to him. You can invite him into every feeling you're having, every experience you're having. And you also kind of know his character from the New Testament. You also get to see kind of the person, the
Mhm.
Jesus behind a holy God. And so it sounds like at your middle school journey, he was becoming really real to you, like a fellow, almost
Yeah.
like the brother that the Bible referred to him as like an elder brother at times, or a father, like a real human
Yeah.
father. So I love that you got that experience, because I think it was the beginning seeds, right, for you to keep that relationship going. And then now you've written this amazing book that's still kind of circling back to that. What would you say as a Christian, as we get ready to wrap up, has been one of the hardest parts of your journey of being a follower, but having to make sense of the world? What would you say has been the hardest part of being a believer?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm in a season right now that has been difficult. And I think when we're disappointed, for me, I've
Mm,
had some things, some like long standing prayers that I'm like, Lord, I don't know why you wouldn't answer this. It seems like a good prayer to me, Um,
yeah.
and sometimes he doesn't answer the way we want him to. And for me, obviously, I've had moments of just feeling really disappointed. Like, Lord, I don't get it, right?
Yeah.
And so, as a Christian, as a believer, right, we can see a lot of hard things in the world, a lot of suffering, a lot of different things that I know with all my heart. I've seen God do miracles. I've witnessed them firsthand. Wendy and I both in our foster and adoptive care journeys. I tell people all the time, don't sign up to be a foster parent unless like the Lord has really told you to do it. But if he's told you
Mm,
to do it, you better go. But I said,
yeah.
as hard as that journey was, there was so much that was, I mean, just brought us to our knees so many times. But I also feel like I got to have front row seats to miracles. I saw things happen that I know were miraculous. There is no way to explain them except that a very personal, very specific prayer was answered by a very personal God. And so
Mm,
I've seen God do things like that over and over. And so I know he is a good God. I know he is faithful. I know that he answers prayers and that our prayers matter to him. And so
yes.
when you get to places where you're like, God, I'm praying a prayer that I know isn't, I don't see how it could be not in line with your will. So why are you not answering? um, that's been hard. And I've been in a season right now where the Lord is really taking me through, um, he's teaching me how to lament. And he's teaching me the difference between grumbling and lamenting. It talks
Mm,
about the Israelites being in the wilderness and God shows them the promised land. And it says they grumbled against him. They refused to go. And they said, we're not going to do it. And so they grumbled against him. And that's when he said, okay, we're going to spend a little more time here in the wilderness. On the
yeah.
other hand, you read the book of Lamentations, it's 5 chapters in the Bible, all pouring their hearts out in real things that are really hard, like deep, deep, deep suffering, the deepest human suffering
Yes.
you can experience. And God allows it. Not only does he allow it, he puts it in, it's in the Bible. And in the middle, it's one of my favorite verses in the Bible. In the middle of Lamentations comes that great is your faithfulness. And so right smack, it's like chapter 3. In the
Mhm.
middle of that chapter, the author of the book of Lamentations is crying out to God and saying, but why not? How long? This kind of suffering. It talks about some of the suffering. It's intense, but it says, great is your faithfulness. I still believe essentially that you are the God of
Yeah.
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You are still the same God. Even in the midst of my suffering, I still believe you are who you were and who you will be. And so I don't know, I've been in a season of that, trying to learn how to lament. And I think lamenting versus grumbling, I've thought about this a lot. Okay, Lord, what's the difference between grumbling and lamenting? And it is coming back to that point of faithfulness, of regardless of the circumstances, regardless of whether you feel like he's answering your prayers the way he wants you to, do I
Mhm.
believe and will I continue to claim that he is a good God and that he is still faithful even when I don't see him doing
Yeah.
what I want him to do? And so and I love that he lets us still cry out to him in that deep ways. And so that's what I've been practicing personally. And I'll extend it to
Yeah.
whoever else needs to hear that.
Yes.
If you're crying out and you're praying prayers and you're feeling disappointed by God, he doesn't say you can't do that. And it's so beautiful. And it's going to make me tear up, but it's so beautiful that he lets us cry out to him and bring
Mm,
all the hardest stuff and be real with him. He doesn't tell us we have to edit it.
yeah.
He does ask that we trust him with it, that we still say, even if you're doing something that I don't like, even if you're letting me suffer longer than I want to suffer, none of us want to suffer. So, a minute of suffering is too much for all of us, right? But sometimes we sit in suffering and we're in a very broken world where we see suffering and we experience it. And it was what I can count on is I know that wasn't God's original plan. And we do live in a broken world and he's still in it with us and he's not leaving us. He's not forsaking us, but he allows us to bring those laments to him. And he asks that we bring them, but still trust that he's good and that he's faithful and that he's in the brokenness with us, even when we feel, tired, alone. That's not true. And the enemy wants to tell us that. And that's why my next book is on spiritual warfare. because I've lived a lot
Yeah.
of this and I know how the enemy works. And I think people need to understand that we have an enemy that wants to lie to us and tell us we're alone and he's forsaken us. And it's not true. Anyway, so that's what's
Good.
been difficult for me as a believer is sometimes just sitting in the suffering longer than we want to, which is, you know, any suffering and just
So
coming
nice.
to the Lord with like, no, you're still good. You're still God. You're still faithful. Even if I don't like what I'm seeing, I know that you have a bigger picture and I am going to trust that your ways are still better than mine.
So profound, everything you're saying. You wrapped up the trust that we try to have in him so beautifully because things don't make sense. And
Mhm.
as you were talking, I was thinking the courage it takes for all of humanity, whoever trusts in Christ and believes in God during the suffering, is so courageous because it doesn't what we're seeing and what we're feeling and what the Bible showed in Lamentations, that he wants
Mhm.
us to be honest and raw in that pain and crying out to him, doesn't make sense to us. Like what we see that causes the pain doesn't make sense. So then to still believe he is good and to trust his word
Yeah.
takes so much courage. And I think that's why as believers we need each other, because we're on our knees, like you said. You said that phrase, and that is true. And what human being hasn't been on their knees? And yet there is a hope that is alive and well that we give to each other. We remind everybody that in the center of the lamentation, God is faithful. We have to hold on, even if the answers don't come in the way we think they should.
Yeah.
Even if the worst pain happens, we need other believers to remind us and how to stay in faith and trust that his goodness is maybe not making sense to us in the mystery of how God is working, but we have a standard, we have a baseline of trust and truth, which is called the Bible.
Mhm.
So I just love how you explained that. It was a really perfect Cliff Notes version of what it feels like when we're in the in between. We don't have
Mhm.
the answers. Like you're in that season right now. We all
Mhm.
go through it. And it's not just once. We know
Oh,
that if we're in a season of the answers are coming and they're working out quite beautifully for us, we know another season's coming where we're like, what the heck, God? What are
mhm.
you doing? I've been praying this prayer for a long time. I'm not seeing the fruit of it. And that's just the journey of being human. So
Mhm.
I really appreciate that perspective. And I like how you brought up the Lamentations because he wants our honesty. That's part of
Yeah.
the personal part of God is he's saying, I can handle it. Give it
Yeah.
all to me, even when you're mad at me, even
Yeah.
when you're hurt by me,
Mhm.
So it just takes a lot of courage for believers to just keep marching forward, even while we're mad at him or grieving. And
Yeah.
he's like, I'm right here with you. I'm right here with
Yeah.
you. And at Christmas, especially with Jesus coming in the flesh to say,
Mhm.
I know what it's like to suffer. I've been right where you are.
Yeah.
And this was the birth of, this incredible experience of the Lord coming down to say, I want to be with my people.
Mhm.
So, hallelujah for that, especially at Christmas time. As we close, I always ask everybody, every guest, who do they wish knew there was room at the Lord's table for them? That's why my podcast is called Room at the Table,
Mhm.
because I know he can handle my doubts. And I was welcome to the
Mhm.
table. Even with my doubts, when I wasn't quite sure to follow him 100%, I loved him. I knew of him. I knew some things about him, but I didn't know a lot because I wasn't going to church regularly. But when I finally made the commitment, it's because I really sensed him saying in the midst of my trial, Kimberly, you could come with your doubts.
Mhm.
Like, don't you know I can handle those? We can work them out together.
Mhm.
So who do you wish knew, whether it's a person, a group of people, really understood there's room at the Lord's table even for them?
Yeah, I mean, my heart is so with I mean, obviously this book you can see I love kids and I see a lot of kids in this day and age feeling looked over or feeling like their life doesn't matter or nobody notices and it would be them
Yes. Yeah.
kids who feel like yeah, feel those things, you know.
Yeah.
And
Well, you have a firsthand view into
yeah.
that from being a foster adoptive mama and the things that you've witness personally in your home and
Mhm.
in the levels of friends, on your next tier out, like Wendy and the other parents.
Yeah.
And that's got to be one of the most just heartbreaking and yet places for potential for God's love,
Mhm.
and inspiration
Yeah.
that you've seen. So I understand why you would
Mhm.
say those kids, because the innocence of a child is just a beautiful thing. As Jesus has said, be like little children. So,
Mhm.
gosh, what an amazing experience to have met you and to hear about this book. And it's related to kids and the Lord and giving back and the joy of the holiday time with Santa Claus and the love of gift giving, right? The greatest gift that the Lord gave us is his beautiful son. And yet we're out here giving gifts, during Christmas time. And so everybody go out and give the gift of this book. Go find it on Amazon, go to the website, and the website is The Top Secret Truth of Santa. Is that right?
It's thetruthaboutsanta.com is the
Okay.
website.
The
Yep.
truthaboutsanta.com. Check it out. It's adorable. It could be a brand new tradition for you. I'm super excited to
Yeah.
go, like I said, buy it and give it away as gifts because I want people to find the history and the connection to Jesus and to help any of our curious kids or adult kids or gosh, even just our peers as adults to learn
Mhm.
about this precious book. Like what a fun thing. So thank you so much for spending time with me today and for what you do as an author. Like what a
Um,
cool legacy you're leaving for your family and now us. So God bless you, Cece. Thank you so much. It was a joy to have you.
Thank you, Kimberly. It was a joy to be here with you.